Hey, Paul from thetechgeeks.com. Just thought I'd give you a little run through. I've just set up a UPS tower on the bench, powered it on, long push on the front button of the unit. As indicators have come on. I've got this plugged into a PoE switch for its Ethernet, and I'm also powering a switch as well. So I've jumped into my controller. We've got an EFG here, so I've just filtered this out to just find my UPS tower, and I just thought it'd be fun just to go through what happens when we adopt it, and then what we actually get to see of the device. So let's just click on adopt to let this run through and add it to our network. Not sure how long this takes, whether it's going to need to do a firmware update. The unit has only been out, or the model has only been out for 2 or 3 weeks at the time of recording this video. So my guess is there probably will be a couple of firmware updates on the unit. So we're going to let that run through the whole process here. And hopefully then in a couple of moments it will come back and show as part of the network, and we have a little explore around what options we have. Okay, so it just took a couple of minutes, all up to date, and we can see the device is here. Let's have a little explore. I'm not expecting lots, like I said, but let's have a little explore around and see what we can see with this. So it looks fairly straightforward. Looks like we can see, and by highlighting the item, we can see here what switchboard it's connected to. We can see the status of the port. That's the management port at the top. These are our pass-through or pass-out surge protection Ethernet ports. We can also see whether anything is actually happening on these ports by the looks of it, and whether anything is actually going on. These ones will be the surge protected side, and these will be the ones with battery power as well. I thought that maybe you'd be able to see how much was being drawn from each outlet. At the moment it doesn't look like that, but we'll continue to have a little look and see, because I've only got something plugged into one of these at this moment in time, and I was sort of expecting it maybe to show us the one that it had, but I think it's showing us a total for the whole thing. We can have a look at telling us, which is nice, like we've got the 600 watts, we're using 60 watts of this at the moment. I've got plugged into this a USW-Pro 10 PoE, so it's a 400 watt power supply unit, but I've only got one of the ports being used for PoE. So we can see that we've got plenty of power available. Obviously, if I was to increase the amount of power consumption on that unit, I would need to be aware of how much that might start to drop this off. Certainly at this time of power, it'd be interesting to know whether it would give me some run time, but by the looks of it, it's not giving me a prediction of that. But would be nice to see what it predicted we could actually run for as a result. But we will continue to have a little look, see if there's anything else in here. This just looks like the normal, where some basic insights. Settings, let's have a little look in here. How do we pick up the IP address? Okay, so this shares the device with other servers, it says. So it looks like you do need to have this NUT software set up, or whatever it is, a service that's running, and they attach that up to a computer. So I might have a look and see if we can get that running with a Windows machine a little bit later on, and allow that, once we've plugged the Windows machine in, to see whether we can then instigate a quiet shutdown at the point that this starts to run out of power. Obviously we can change the LED status and remove that. Set replacement device, so we can copy the config, load the config, turn the device off. Those are really all the settings that we get by the looks of things across here. I don't think there's anything down there. No, so this is really all of the information that we get at this moment in time. We'll have a little look later on, like I said, once I get a computer connected up, and see whether we can tell it to shut down, or at least talk to the other device. I think this will support 3 NUT servers, but we'll have to investigate that a little bit more. And then it would have been nice to have seen a sort of predicted runtime at this load rate. I think when it's half loaded or so, this was expected to run about 7 minutes. So maybe get about 10 minutes or so at this point in time, because we're only consuming 10% of it. But at least that's our start look. Not a lot to look around, but I wasn't expecting a lot. We'll see if we can get that NUT server running a little bit later as well. All right, so about 24 hours has passed since I set this up. What I've actually now done is I've connected my computer, the computer I'm actually recording from, to this UPS as well, just to see how that would go. So we'll have a look at some of those results there. I'm just going to add some more devices as we go along. I've got a Windows machine here, so I actually wanted to set this up and try the NUT side of things, and we'll talk about that in a moment as well. So let's have a look. I know that there's some new firmware on the horizon for this. I'm currently on 1.4.18. I think we will get some more monitoring and alerting useful information in here. I think you will also potentially get a list of devices that are connected in due course. And certainly I'm not trying these with Ubiquiti devices. We may in due course add in a UDM-Pro and just see if we can get that listed in here. But let's just try and do this way round at the moment. So basically I've made a few changes in here. So I have enabled, well, let's just go back and have a little look here. So you can see I'm now using about 96 watts, about 17%. I've got my Pro XG 10 PoE switch connected, and I've got my desktop computer connected. You can see our battery states here. We can see how long it's been up for. We don't get how long it thinks the battery's going to last. I'm hoping that those will come in due course. We do have then the NUT settings here. So network utility tools or UPS tools. So this is how I've set this up. And I'm doing this with a Windows client, which I'll show you in a moment. So I've ticked here the NUT server. I've given it an ID because maybe you have multiple of these on the network, so it makes it a little bit more useful to be able to identify them. And I would suggest you set up the login credentials. If you set this up, then actually the client that you're using can draw some of the missing information that we don't see in the interface and show you that as well. The idea of this NUT server is it will send a signal to your device to tell it to shut down. You can actually use the client to force that to happen already, but this is an extra bit that the UPS can do when it knows that there's a limitation of how long it's going to run for. So once this is ticked, let me just show you now what I've actually done on my computer here, Windows computer, to actually get this to talk to the UPS tower. Now the idea is we're going to install a piece of software on my Windows computer that's going to talk to my UPS tower on this port, and then it's going to receive that information and tell it to shut down. So let's just do a couple of basics here. Our basics being, if I can just see if I can jump out of this. No, it won't. All right, let's just start a new screen. What do I want to first be able to do? I know that I've got this on 172.20.20.102. All right, so I want to be able to see, can I ping my UPS tower from my computer? If I can't, then it's not, this monitoring is not going to work. And then I might want to use something called Telnet. If I use Telnet, I can just see if I'm going to get a response from the port. I should just get a flashing cursor. That again means that there's no firewall between me and the UPS tower. And I get a flashing cursor here. And this is showing me that I can see this on this port here. All right, so now that I know that's up and running, I want to just go and grab a NUT client for Windows. There are quite a few of these around. This is the one that I found that works for me. Make sure you get the latest version, or there might be one more recent than this. The one I'm using is the 16th of November 2023. You get the installer down here, the Setup MSI, which will then install this onto your computer. And essentially you're going to get this nice little setup. Now it won't look like this once you've when you've installed it. You will need to go into settings and you need to put the IP address of your host in. You need to put the port, the UPS name for reference, a login and a password, which are the two items that we obviously set up over here. If you want to be able to disclose the password, then you can obviously just grab that there. I have found on a number of occasions what you have to do is exit the application and restart it. And you can choose some of your shutdown options here as well. If you don't, I've noticed if you don't do something with the password in there, then you don't get a lot of the monitoring on the screen, which I'll show you in a moment. And then some of your shutdown options aren't probably useful. Shutdown on the NTU's signal. I would imagine is one that you probably want to tick, but you can obviously control this as well. I've given mine a 2-minute window. So I've now got this running, and what's really useful, once this is actually configured, this is more what I was hoping to see actually in our information here, which we don't quite see yet. So we can see it spotted what it is, we know its serial number. It's actually giving me a runtime based on what the battery charge is and how much load is on the UPS and how much voltage is running through it. So with one computer and my PoE switch, which isn't doing much PoE, I can see that potentially I've got a 28-minute runtime from this. We'll probably test this out a little bit later on in this video. But this client is what you want to use. There's a Linux version, there's a Mac version. So if you want it to auto shut down, if you want the UPS to auto shut down non-Ubiquiti equipment, then you want to get this client. I believe it in total supports 3 devices with the NUT server settings. So we will try and add a UDM-Pro to this so that we can see whether we get anything else appear in here as it identifies it for us. But hopefully that shows you what you can do, which client you can get on Windows, and then see some of this additional information that you get, which then allows you to manage how you want your computer to be shut down as the battery power drops. So what I've just done now is put the NUT client on my Windows virtual machine so that I can simulate what's going to happen when we start this UPS running out of power, because obviously I need to be able to video what I'm doing and not have it close down my local machine. So I've got our NUT client running here. It's giving us some live stats for what it sees is happening with the UPS. And obviously this is fluctuating sort of between 12 and 20 odd minutes, really just depending on how much power is being used. What I'm actually going to do, I'm actually going to see whether we can put some settings in here. So I want to put down, if the shutdown run time is less than, let's put this at 10 minutes. Or if we receive a shutdown signal from the device itself. I'm hoping therefore once we actually remove the load from the UPS, we'll actually see this fairly quickly start to drop down. So I'm just going to apply that. It does seem to be when we do this that it seems to connect and disconnect. So there we go, it's connected and it should have now taken those settings. So in theory, what we can now do is pull the power from our UPS and watch and see what happens as this happens. So just give me a moment, I'm going to pull the power. Okay, so I've pulled the power on the UPS. You can see that our status is now gone to yellow. We're green on the battery. Our countdown timer is running. For those of you who saw the last bit that I did, you would have realized I probably made a mistake when I put the shutdown in. This was meant to be in seconds, so I've run this so that it should start shutting down at 7 minutes. We'll see if this actually works. If we just hop on over here to our UPS tower, we can see that the battery is showing as active. We can see how much power usage it is running now as well. Well, obviously it was only running at 100 and something originally, but obviously now that the battery is fully being used, our wattage has jumped up quite significantly. Obviously, again, we're still not getting our runtime stats in here. We are reliant on what we actually see on our client here itself. So we can see that we've got about 54 seconds left for this to count down. I'm hoping then that this client, and it's obviously the client that's doing it, we would wait for a signal. The signal will probably happen from the UPS tower, maybe about 2 minutes. I want to get this going a little bit sooner than that because I know that it takes a little while longer for a Windows machine to shut down, for example. That's why I've set this at 7 minutes. So hopefully once that hits that, the client will realize that there's less than 7 minutes to run and it will instigate a shutdown. But obviously this is talking to the UPS tower. And this is again just showing us again what's happening on here. Obviously you can see it's now been running for 13 days. Actually, in fact, it's now given us, so it doesn't give this, or hadn't been giving this, so we'll check it back in a minute, hadn't been giving us the runtime in the firmware. The firmware is still on the older version, but it seems like when we start running onto battery, then it gives us the runtime that's left. We can see now, hit the 7 minutes, Windows shutdown is now starting to take place on this device, and we can see that this is actually doing what it should do. Okay, so really interesting there is the fact that I've actually put the power back in and it's set for charging. So we actually saw that the shutdown worked. We saw that once we switched to battery, got a runtime indication happening in here, which was useful. It would have been nice to give us an idea of what we were getting as a whole ahead of this games, but this at least shows us what happens in here. And you can see our on alert has disappeared on here as well. So hopefully that can show you what can happen when you're using the client and then what we actually see in here. Okay, so up until this point, we've been having this running connected to our EFG. Now our EFG doesn't really have anything that needs to be shut down. So I want to see what would happen to add this to a UDM-Pro that we've got, because a UDM-Pro does have that ability to, obviously is recording whatever and would want to shut down safely. So if I just added it to the network, it didn't seem to have any way of actually being able to connect to the UPS tower. So my assumption is that the UPS tower would need to be on its LAN side and adopted to it. So I've actually started up our UDM-Pro here and connected it to a LAN side, so it has a different IP address. What I'm actually going to do now is factory reset the UPS tower and then adopt it into the UDM-Pro. And I'm hoping when I do that, that actually the two might then automatically talk to each other. But let's see where we get to. I'm going to lose all my previous settings, so I'd need to go back and reset those up in due course to make it all work. But for right now, this is all that we need to do to try and get this little bit of test working. So let me just quickly factory default the UPS tower. All right, so the reset hole is around the back there where the Ethernet cable goes in. So I've just reset that with my little paperclip change there, but I've just reset that, held that in for about 10 seconds or so. So I'm hoping in a few moments that will appear in this UDM-Pro as a device to actually be able to adopt. There we go, straight away ready and to go. So let's just click on adopt and let's run that process through. It only took a couple of moments before when we did this. There we go, so it is now in place. Doesn't seem to necessarily have anything different at this moment in time. It's immediately picked up the charge. Obviously you can see that that's picked up. It was at 65%, 30 minutes ago or so when we had this running. It can see what it's connected to. I was hoping I was going to see the device listed under here. I've seen some images around that shows the devices that are connected to it. But let's just tag this on here. We'll call this UPS-tower. I'm not sure whether I should give it login credentials, but UPS-tower and tower1 is what we had as the passwords before. So I'm just going to apply those. And I'm not really sure. I'm going to need to go and have a little bit of investigation now of how I make my UDM-Pro be seen as a device on here. I'm presuming that there is some setting somewhere in here that should allow it to connect to it, or because it's now adopted in here, it should be able to automatically see it. So I'm going to do a little bit of investigation and then hopefully I can find the solution and show you where you might do that for yourself as well. Okay, so I've done a good lot of looking around here. I've upgraded my device to the latest firmware. I'm doing this in November 2025. So I've pushed the UDM up to 4.46. This is on 9521, so it's up to date. There's no other options from a UPS tower. I do know that there's a new firmware coming out for this, but there is no option I can see, and I've seen around a lot of other people that have had this option to safe pair with the devices. It appears in this sort of section here, and you can click safe pair and then you can pair it with the device that it already sees. Evidently, for what I've tried this on the network that had a UNAS on it. It didn't seem to allow pairing or show anything in there. I've put this directly with the UDM-Pro and I don't seem to be able to get a pairing option here. So my assumption is that something is out of sync between the firmwares here and we're going to be waiting a little bit longer. Obviously it still functions, but we need to wait a little bit longer before it can ultimately be connected to some of your devices that are Ubiquiti. It seems to work better if I'm going to use a third-party piece of software like that NUT software that I've got at the moment. So I hadn't really wanted to finish this video on I can't pair this with current OS consoles. I know there'd been lots of talk about the fact that you could only pair this with, say, with a UNAS or a UNVR, but I did also know that you could pair this with some of the OS consoles. But something seems to have happened in the linking of the firmware that was here, or the version in the control plane for Unifi network, or maybe the actual OS console itself. Version 10 is now just released and that has fixed up some of the pairing issues. I believe it's also introduced OS console, so like the UDM-Pro, UDM-SE in there. But having left my UPS tower on for a couple of days now, it's in the same IP range as these devices. Well, it actually isn't, to be fair. It's all connected to a router that can see all of these. I can now see this option that I've been waiting for, which is safe shutdown pairing, and I can now pair this directly with my UPS tower in the same way. Obviously, I do need these devices to be physically connected to my UPS tower. Although it will shut them down even if they aren't, but probably logical that you have the battery backup and surge protection connected as well. You'll find in version 10 that you should hopefully have the option here if you've got a UDM SE or whatever, that you should be able to see that in there as well, because obviously that has a hard drive and we want that to shut down. So all I've done is found my tower, clicked on it, opened the menu up, the devices that it can see on my local network I can pair with. So I can now pair my UNAS. It's going to ask for the username and password. This will be of our Unifi account, I think, or it might be your local admin, depending on how you've got it set up. So let me just grab that information and we'll see if we can just pair these together. Okay, so I've just popped in my Unifi account details for there. And there you go. This is actually now paired. And again, if this device was connected, it should be connected to your UPS tower or UPS to you. Then obviously as soon as this starts getting down to very little power, it will tell that device to go and start shutting down all the hard drives. And obviously then if you don't want that to happen, you can unpair this. Allows you to add a number of devices in there, which obviously run slightly different to the ones that we set up with the NUT server there as well. So that's all you need to do there to unpair it. So hopefully that set of videos has been useful. Obviously this is a developing product. I finished this just at the beginning of December 2025. So supply of these is only just starting to kick in fully, and the software is being developed. But hopefully that gives you a good idea of what I've been able to find out about the UPS tower and how it works, how to connect it up and get it to auto shut down, a Windows machine as well. Head on over to our YouTube channel. Got plenty more how-to guides, performance guides, rough and readies as well. So head on over there, subscribe and stay up to date.